That's right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Howard University and its School of Business. I want to first of all express my appreciation for all of those who have decided to attend the second panel um, of the 2014 Nations Classic event. We had a great panel last night composed of our former student government presidents. They focused on the HBCU experience. Is it a just cause or is it just cause? And it was very, very exciting, and members of our freshman class participated. Today, we're going to engage in the second panel, and we're going to feature first the presidents of our storied institutions, President Wayne Frederick and John Wilson, who are now the leaders of Morehouse College and Howard University, the progenies of Benjamin Mays and Mordecai Wyatt Johnson. They are leading us in the long walk, and they are candles in the dark. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. I would like to first, before going into the program, ask the Dean of our chapel, Dean Richardson, to please come forward and lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, when a people were in danger of internalizing the hopelessness brought forth by slavery and segregation, you assembled men and women from historically black colleges and universities whose creativity and intellect were second to none. In doing so, you made them a beacon of hope and promise of a proud people. From Howard University, Morehouse College, and from other HBCUs, you sent scholar activists to the courts and to the communities and institutions across this nation that changed not only the laws, but changed the course of history. From these institutions, you have educated individuals who have become leaders not only in this nation, but leaders in the global community. We give thanks for our HBCUs for their many contributions to our communities, nation, and the world. Be with us now, O God, as we grapple with the issues of our day, as we discern your call as institutions to educate men and women who will meet the global challenges that we face in dealing with poverty, education, religion, healthcare, technology, human rights, and in so many areas. As we listen to our leaders, President Wilson and President Frederick, as we engage in dialogue, grant us new dreams and new visions. Give us new questions and new answers to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. Make us to see not only the challenges, but the opportunities that are before us. The opportunity to make our great academic institutions even greater. And opportunities to once again make our nation and the nations of this world what they still must be. In your name we pray, amen.
Let us now receive a welcome to the campus to our university from the 17th president of Howard University, President Wayne Frederick.
Hi, good morning. On behalf of faculty, students, and alumni, I'm honored to welcome you to the campus of Howard University for the fourth AT&T Nations Football Classic and More Than a Game academic programs. I have to certainly take the opportunity as well to thank President Wilson for not just being here, but for participating in this. His role, as I told him last night, among the HBCUs needs to be broadening. We'll soon be calling him the Dean of the HBCU Presidents as he leads the storied Morehouse College, and for that we're very appreciative. I also want to take an opportunity to acknowledge and thank Dr. Thornton. A lot of times, obviously because of the administrative structure, the presidents at our institutions take a lot of credit for a lot of what goes on, good and bad. But on this occasion, I think prudence dictates that I acknowledge the fact that this was an idea born out of his, own dream, and one that he has fertilized well. And so I want you to be recognized by all of us for your efforts around that. I also want to acknowledge and thank the following individuals who are here today. First, Dr. George Cooper, the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. We certainly thank you for the advocacy and leadership that you've been providing for HBCUs, and obviously serving as a primary voice before the Secretary of Education and President Obama. So we thank you for all that you're doing. As I said, Dean, I noticed that Dr. Wilson acknowledged the present dean, and maybe he'll pass the baton on to you, the President Emeritus of Morgan State, Dr. Richardson. We thank you for being here as well. We have to thank Mr. Eric Moss, the Associate Vice President of Events DC, and the team for setting up the Nations Classic. The level of interest that has been drawn in the game is one that we certainly appreciate, and the last 3 games have been very competitive. We don't expect that tomorrow, Dr. Wilson, but we nonetheless, they have been competitive. But and I hope I'm not saying that, and I'm the one who's going to be talking about, I wish it was a little more competitive. The past 3 years have been very fruitful between our scholar athletes, the academic programs, and then the contributions to our nation and the global community. When you look at the discourse that will take place, the debate this afternoon with the debate teams is one that is garnering a lot of interest. I don't do a lot of tweeting, Dr. Thornton, but I did get a few tweets, people asking me if it was going to be live streamed. So it looks like there might be a fantasy league coming out of this debate activity, so we need to look at that. The symposium this morning is among the featured More Than a Game academic programs that are dedicated to showcasing examples of what HBCUs can produce. And I think at this time in our history, this is a very, very germane topic. The initial academic symposium panel last evening provided thought-provoking discussions, and I had the opportunity to host Dr. Wilson for dinner, and after he left, I went on YouTube and looked at the entire proceedings, and I was very impressed again with the richness of the discussion, the panelists, and I have to thank Dr. Greg Carr for his moderation of that, so we appreciate it very much. Like I said, on Saturday, we hope to have a memorable time. This football rivalry began back in 1923. I'm not keeping score, but I happen to know who's leading the rivalry. And tomorrow, I think we can put a little more distance in that. We'll make sure we get that. In closing, I want to thank AT&T for its sponsorship of the Nations Classic, and I look forward to its enhanced engagement with Howard Morehouse and the HBCU community. And before I leave, I just saw something that made me think of someone. Our distinguished panelists in the next panel after Dr. Wilson and I have a discussion will include NAFEO's president, Leslie Baskerville, and I want to acknowledge her as well. Again, the advocacy that's taking place really does support us. Our Faculty Senate Chair, Professor Lorenzo Morris, will also sit on that panel with Dr. Richardson, so we look forward to hearing that rich discussion as well. Again, welcome and thank you.
We will now hear from the current director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges, Dr. Cooper, former president of South Carolina State.
Good morning. President Frederick, it's an honor to be on your campus today. Thank you for your welcome remarks. President Wilson, look forward to your comments and the conversation that will take place today. I'm honored to be here with you on this occasion to talk about HBCUs and the global mission that we have. For the faculty and students who are here, it provides a framework from which we can be engaged in looking at the future and how HBCUs can be more involved in this global economy that we recognize today. I bring you greetings from the White House. I bring you greetings from our staff. I bring you greetings from Secretary Duncan, who I serve as advisor to on issues related to higher education. HBCUs throughout their histories have provided a diverse student body. Recent research shows that 76% of the students who attend HBCUs identify themselves as African Americans, 13% white, 3% Hispanic, Latino, 1% Asian, and the remaining 7% includes students of 2 or more races and students who represent the international community. It demonstrates that today we live true to our mission. We have never discriminated in admission of students by race or by sex or by orientation. An important mission for us as we look at not only the current situation at our institution, but the future aspirations that we have to be fully engaged in providing opportunity, access and opportunity for students who choose to attend our institutions in a very competitive environment. So I think the conversation that will take place today will emphasize what we've done historically and what our aspirations are for the future. And as I become engaged in this conversation about HBCUs, the press always says, why should HBCUs exist today in our society? But my answer is, why shouldn't we exist if we look at the opportunity that we provide today in 2014 in terms of access and opportunity and where our graduates go? There's a 65% probability that if a student attends an HBCU that they're going to move on to graduate school. What does that say about creation of opportunities by other institutions who provide the same, say that they provide the same access and opportunity for our students? If we look at the global society and we look at those leaders of nations, particularly in Africa, who have come through our HBCUs and have, through that experience, provide current and future leadership for our nations, I think that's important. So as we look at the 105 HBCUs and the 47 nations on the continent of Africa, it means that we could and should be providing the leadership for education, research, and community outreach. And we've had a group of Mandela Washington Fellows who have come to our institutions this year. They will take with them an understanding of our institutions, and they'll provide the framework for students who are currently enrolled in our institutions to be involved with them as they become change agents for their nations because of the experiences that we provide at HBCUs. So I'd just like to say welcome, and I look forward to the conversations today. And this provides a reference point from which in future years we can say that HBCUs have been relevant and will be relevant in this global engagement in terms of opportunity and entrepreneurship and research and outreach. Historically, I'd just like to leave one nugget. The first HBCU to be involved in international development was Tuskegee University in 1901 to support an agrarian nation, Togo. The institutions that we have today are the change agents that will provide the same kinds of change in Africa, in technology and entrepreneurship and creation of new businesses and development of communities that will start today. So as we look at the beginnings in 1901 Tuskegee University, today 2 presidents will launch the future in terms of how HBCUs will be engaged. So I welcome you all to this conversation, and I'm confident that we will all be inspired when the day has ended. Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, you mentioned the Mandela scholars. It gives me an opportunity to recognize the presence of our Yale individuals who are with us this morning. Would you please stand? These are the Young African Leaders Initiative. Give them a round of applause, please. Dr. Frederick, thank you all so much for being with us this morning. Dr. Frederick and the African Studies Department and our university agreed to host their presence this summer, and so thank you all for coming to the capstone. Dean Harvey, I see you in the back, sir. You and Ms. Waterman, thank you all for hosting us this morning and providing this venue. I would, before I go on, remind you that this is being streamed live nationally and internationally, and I want to thank the School of Education, Mr. Martin and his staff, for streaming this event as well as the one last evening. And you will also stream, as Dr. Frederick mentioned, our student debate, where the Ferguson question, Dr. Frederick, will be debated today. So it's going to be interesting to see which student body, Morehouse or Howard, has to debate the opposite position on Ferguson. That's going to be interesting. Also, before I introduce Professor Crooms to bring her panel forward, I want to acknowledge the work of Ms. Pittman, who helped to staff this. Thank you, Ms. Pittman. She's helped to staff this. And Dr. Frederick and President Wilson, this is the faculty of Howard University has been intricately involved in organizing this. 2-point people, Dr. Williams, chair of our English department. Where is she? There she is. Thank you so much. And Dr. Greg Carr, Dr. Everett, and many other faculty members who have been central players over the past 4 years in making sure that this event takes place. I want to now ask Professor Crooms to please come forward. I'd like to say a couple of words about her. She is going to moderate the panel of our presidents, and she is the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Howard's School of Law. She serves as I said, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the School of Law. She is a professor who teaches constitutional law and gender law, international human rights, and Supreme Court jurisprudence. She received a BA in economics from Howard University in 1984, and I remember her as a student. And she received also the JD from the University of Michigan. Dr. Krum, would you please come forward and introduce our two presidents and lead the panel? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to moderate what I trust will be a very interesting and engaging, it'll be okay, very engaging conversation. I welcome the opportunity to sit down and pose questions both generated by myself. To be completely honest, it was my status on my Facebook page, and got some very interesting questions from Morehouse alums as well as Howard alums. And the hope is that there will be some questions in the audience as well. And at this point, there's really no further need to delay. President Frederick, President Wilson, will you please come take your seat so we can start our do they? Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to campus.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good to see you. Okay, so let's start. I want to start by looking backwards before we start looking forward. And I'm interested, since you're both relatively new presidents, you since 2012?
No, 2013.
Oh, even newer than I thought. 2013. You almost yesterday. Let truth be told. I'm wondering, what is it about the history of your respective institutions that made you want to become president?
Me first.
You're our guest. We'll have
Okay.
you start first.
I think the history of Morehouse College is well known. Morehouse, founded in the same year as Howard University, but devoted to African American men primarily, has been a leadership machine, really. You judge an institution, I think, primarily by its alumni. The people who have, the institution has sent out into the world to have an impact in whatever field the institution prepared them for. And I think our alums have been quite distinctive in a number of fields. So I have to say I was drawn to Morehouse as a student because I was aware of that legacy. I was in a church in Philadelphia, and the pastor of that church, I think, talked about Morehouse as much as he talked about Jesus. So I think a disproportionate number of guys in the church ended up going to Morehouse because we were drawn to this place where you could go and you receive the kind of education and cultivation that would position you for leadership. So I figured it was a great place to attend, and subsequently figured it was a great place to lead.
Dr.
It-
Frederick?
Yeah, along the same lines, my mom probably spoke about Howard as much as she spoke about Jesus, because of the impact Howard had on everything about our lives. I mean, the obstetricians who delivered my brothers were Howard grads. The prime minister of my country at the time, Eric Williams, he was a political science professor here at Howard. So the impact all around our lives had a significant fingerprint of Howard on it. And I think the excellence and the service that Howard represented is what drew me to the university. Apart from our alum, when you look at what I think I received here from faculty and students alike, it's just not something that you can receive anywhere else. There's an intangible that Howard provided during my education. And that story is well documented. I came here with a simple dream, or at least I thought it was simple, to become a physician. And Howard gave me so much more. So the opportunity to lead is, one that I'm very humbled by. And I see it more as a service to give back. I would never be able to pay the debt of gratitude that I owe this institution. But I certainly would like to make a down payment, a substantial one.
Okay. So, fast forward to the year 2025. You've had a very successful run as president for both of you. What's your legacy?
My legacy, if all dreams are fulfilled.
Absolutely.
My inaugural address, the theme is the world of our dreams. And what you have when you have the world of our dreams at Morehouse is you have two things, capital preeminence and character preeminence. As far as we can tell, those two things have never existed on a single campus ever, to the degree that we're talking about. There are plenty of institutions with capital preeminence. They have the huge endowments, immaculate physical space, extremely well-paid faculty, well-supported students, an administration that hums like a machine. You go in any office and get service in a few seconds and be gone, if you have to go there at all. Do it online. And first-rate education through and through, and positions you not only to be intelligent but to be good. So capital preeminence is in terms of the money, the things you can count. But character preeminence, that's where the good comes in. You are able to not just compete in the world that is, but you are able to imagine a new world and work for it. And you have what it takes to create it. So I think Morehouse, Howard, and other HBCUs have had character preeminence as judged by our alums. I believe we could have more. But what we have not had to the degree that is state-of-the-art in the industry of higher education is capital preeminence. So if all of my dreams are fulfilled by 2025, I believe we will see the world of our dreams at Morehouse College. We'll see capital and character preeminence. And I have insisted on my campus that I appreciate this question because this is not about John Wilson becoming president of Morehouse College, and I don't think it's about Dr. Wayne Frederick becoming president of Howard University. I've interacted enough with Dr. Frederick to know that we have in mind the kind of institution we want to leave behind. So this is not about our arrival, it's about what the place looks like when we depart.
In 2025, hopefully my 10-year-old son would be a junior, and my 8-year-old daughter would be a freshman right here, getting remission of tuition,
There
although
we
I'm
go.
retired.
Thank you.
And getting the seeds, the seeds that hopefully will flower into them going out and changing the world as well. My view of what we would create and leave behind, and I say we because I think to Dr. Wilson's point, this is not just about me. My presidency is about the community. I am a product of this community, and I hope that everyone sees in me a little bit of themselves and their opportunity to change the landscape. I talk about us not providing a degree here at Howard and providing an education, and more importantly, providing an education that people can then go out and change the world around them. And so my vision for 2025 would be that we would have put things in place that we are drawing the type of student that has the conscientiousness about the world around them, to see the role that they must play in changing the communities around them and providing the solutions to all of the social ills in our society. And I hope that that's what Howard would be seen as in 2025, that not just issues that are germane to African American culture, but issues that are germane to America as a whole, because I really do believe that we provide the solutions, or we have in the past provided the solutions to many of those problems. So some of the things we may not necessarily think of in a linear fashion, such as energy and independence, those types of things. I hope that our academic fortitude will impact all of those things because of the further impact it has on the community, the environment around us. Are we leading in atmospheric science and those types of fields as well, where we're directly impacting on making lives better throughout? And then the other thing that I would hope that we would do is not just recognize that how we provide an education is different because of the students that we will be bringing in at that time, but that we have put things in place that we would have met the students where they will be. Leveraging technology is absolutely going to change the face of higher education, as it already has in some ways, but we must lead in that. The one thing that we must not be doing in 2025 is following. We have unique institutions, and therefore the solutions have to be unique, and we have to make sure that we are leading. There's not a blueprint out there, I think, for us to follow. As Dr. Wilson pointed out, some of the institutions with capital preeminence, they have not provided a roadmap that we can easily follow. That's not our history, and it's not going to be our future. But at the same time, we must find a way to gain capital preeminence, not necessarily following that roadmap, but creating our own. And I hope in 2025 we're nimble enough to create those types of resources and to create that new roadmap as well.
I'm interested in terms of a follow-up question to hear your views about not just markets on the continent, but throughout the diaspora, and your views about how those markets, I mean, I have a degree in economics, so it's hard to sometimes to back away from that, but how those markets play into how you might see your ability to, in fact, achieve that vision, the character and capital preeminence, the type of leadership that you're talking about being about Howard's footprint, not just in the United States, but throughout the global community.
Yeah, I think my approach is going to be a non-traditional approach. We talk about the African continent a lot, but people of the African diaspora don't only live on the African continent, and we have to recognize that the world as it is changing, we have to recognize that our presence throughout the world and providing solutions is limitless. And so, for instance, I give you one example is if you look at the BRIC nations, for instance, I would love to see us develop more programs with the BRIC nations. We've done that, not necessarily in a purposeful manner, but that has been the result of the ingenuity of our faculty. So Brazil, we have we're working with the State Department to bring students to our campus. India, I was in India for a pharmaceutical conference, gave a keynote there. They have 1,000 pharmacy schools in India. So when you think of the power, the brain thrust that they can have and the impact they can have on the pharmaceutical industry, in my opinion, they're probably going to lead in terms of the manufacturing and potentially even the R&D department in pharmacy soon. I left 2 pharmacy students there who were doing a month in India. I think we have to be there. China with our Freshman Leadership Academy. Our students are already going there, and multiple other students are going. So even our engagement of the BRIC nations, I think, represents the fact that we're looking throughout the entire globe for that opportunity to bring in the character preeminence and the capital preeminence as the world gets smaller. Now, obviously, Russia is an area that we haven't been into as much, and I think in Europe in general is an area that we have to continue to explore. Our gear program from engineering, they were in Turkey this past summer, and I like, those are the things that I want to see us to continue to promote. Looking at South America, looking at Central America, are there other areas where there are emerging markets where our students can go and have an impact and really bring back as well even more energy, more interest in different ways of doing things, different ideas, and I think that really will speak to our global involvement.
Yeah, I reminded of the fact that we recently lost an icon in Vincent Harding, Dr. Vincent Harding. And long before his death, particularly at his death, I reread an essay that he wrote that was probably among the most powerful essays I've read in my life. And it was an essay that he wrote about W.B. Du Bois, about the messianic vision of Du Bois. And he talks in this essay about Du Bois's view that that Africans, African Americans, people of African descent, have some unfinished business in the world. That the story of our journey has taken us to a place where the world has not yet seen or experienced our gift entirely. And so what we have to do, and he put a charge to our HBCUs, we have to position ourselves to fulfill our destiny as a people. This is a very powerful essay, and I commend everyone in my hearing to read it. Can find it in a collection of essays on Du Bois called Black Titan, and it's a one by Vincent Harding. And I read that while I was a student at Morehouse College. I read that essay for the first time and talked with Dr. Harding many times about it. And at the memorial we had at Morehouse College, I spoke about that essay and its impact on me and how it informs my leadership of Morehouse College. So, to your question, we are very much focused on the continent of Africa and around the diaspora. We have a prominent board member who is zeroed in on a mission with us to bring in more students from the continent, and that's already happening. We have only, I think, a much smaller percentage than Howard, only 100 students now, but we're looking to have 100 per class. And we want to reach beyond Africa or those of African descent. We believe that the magnetism of Morehouse and our leadership model, our approach to education, has worldwide appeal. And we are seeing now students from other countries come. We just graduated last year, a white student from South Africa who came because he was drawn to the legacy of King and the leadership message, and he is intending to be president of South Africa one day. And so we said more power to him. He graduated with high honors. He's going back and he's going to go on that journey. Back in '07, we had a white American as valedictorian, and he has since made a mark in the financial industry, and is a very proud Morehouse man. So we understand our heritage is rich. We are a black college, and for the foreseeable future, we will be that. But what we have to offer is universally powerful.
Okay. Well, that's a nice segue. Dr. Cooper's introductory remarks referenced commitments to diversity and a wide range of diversity. In the 21st century, we're looking at issues play out on the national stage and on the global stage, quite honestly, that wouldn't have played out that way, let's say, 50 years ago, although the issues undoubtedly existed. I'm wondering what, for example, does Truth in Service, or I looked at your website, I really like, what is it, the College of Black Choice for Black Men? No, the College of Choice for Black Men, your tagline. How do those play out today? I'm thinking cutting edge issues of diversity, questions of gender, sexual identity, sexual orientation, LGBTI issues. On the agenda for both Howard and Morehouse, outside of the agenda because we're about black folks?
I think it has to be on the agenda. There's no doubt about it. When I became provost and I looked at the landscape of our academic deans, as an example, there's an iconic picture at the main gates of some major leaders at Howard: Charles Drew, Britt. These guys took a picture. It's interesting because at that time they all had pipes and cigarettes in their hands as well. But they were the academic force on our campus. And this past spring, I asked one of the photographers to take a picture of our deans, our female deans. We have 6 female deans now at the university. I think that's something that has gone on unnoticed or unacknowledged, but it's purposeful because if you look at our undergraduate campus, it's 70-30, 70% female. Our academic leadership should look like that, and we shouldn't give lip service to that. And I feel very strongly about that issue. So that diversity and that purposefulness of inclusion in terms of when we look across the landscape of who can lead, who should participate, I think we have to do that. I think having you here moderate is not something that we should overlook as well, just to make the point. And then beyond that, when I look at my 10 and 8-year-old, the next time they see a white person in the White House will be the first time, right? They're gonna look,
Interesting.
and that's if a white person wins the next election, because there's probably some brother or sister somewhere who's gonna show up in similar fashion to Mr. Obama, because now he's shattered the ceiling. People believe they can do it. But just think about that. Just think about a 2016 election, CNN announcing at 10 p.m. at night that the new president is a white person. And my kids looking at the television saying, whoa, what happened here? So when we think about diversity, we have to recognize that the experience that the young people that we're trying to train and educate and the kids who are coming behind them are coming with a very different version, right? My son and daughter who go to school with folks who obviously don't look like them are coming home and telling me more often than not that the kids in their class want their hair to feel like theirs, etc., as opposed to my daughter coming home and saying, she wants to have blonde hair. She's saying that the kids in her class want to look like her. That's a very different dynamic. That's not a dynamic that we all grew up with. And I think some of those identity issues, it's going to be very interesting as we navigate the world in front of us in terms of how we see that. Now, having said all of that, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that our history is still going to have us in a circumstance where we have to combat certain issues, and we can't lose sight of that. We can't be lulled into a slumber that would suggest that we are in a post-racial state. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm suggesting is that some of the forces and the dynamic nature of what's going to occur in terms of identity, whether it's sexual identity, et cetera, is going to be different, and we have to meet people where they are. Ferguson, Missouri, and what occurred there would not have taken place if we still didn't have issues. So let's not look beyond that. But how we approach it and how we provide solutions for it. Do we look at economic empowerment? Do we look at environmental circumstance? Do we go attack the educational base? Do we bring back the issue of jobs and in our community? Do we, in other words, the tools that we use, we may not necessarily, the kids today get criticized a lot for not being activists because they probably don't take over the A building. And I'm not trying to suggest anything to anyone. But they leverage social media to make their point. And we have to recognize that activism is going to come in a different shape and form. So when something is broken in the towers, they send me a tweet, and you better believe I send my administrator an email immediately to take care of it. So they still are getting the stuff done, just in a different way. And so I think all of those things we have to bring together to look at how we deal with diversity, and it has to be on the agenda.
I agree. It's on the agenda for us. Morehouse College will always be male. We'll enroll males. We will on my watch and likely well beyond my watch enroll African American males predominantly. I don't see that changing. I think there's a virtue in that, and it's our tradition, and it's our destiny. So I don't see the issue of diversity impinging on that in any meaningful way. On other matters of diversity, we want to make our environment within that frame, predominantly African American and male, all male. We want to make our environment welcoming to everyone. There are all kinds. We're not trying to create just one kind of man in the world. There are all kinds of ways to approach being a man, but there's only one kind of Morehouse man. All right. And what I mean by that is, it's about being a leader. It's about being distinctive, with integrity and competence and confidence. And so, my contemporary classmate, friend, met him freshman week, really, is Spike Lee. Spike had a different approach to things because he was, zeroed in on the arts, not business. So he wasn't wearing that suit, carrying that briefcase, which tended then to be the Morehouse frame. He had a different kind of sensibility about Morehouse, but what we appreciate about him is he intended to make a mark for himself in the area that he chose. There was no cinema major, film major at Morehouse. He was a trailblazer. He said, I want to make film at the end of his sophomore year. By the time he graduated, he had made a film, and then went to NYU, made another one, and then the rest is history. So what I want to say to you is, I think we're both going to maintain a certain tradition. Howard has a great legacy. The name Howard means something, and when I meet alums from Howard, I have expectations from Howard folks. All right, I know they're going to be a cut above graduates from a lot of other places. And to this day, for me, in my experience in engaging folk from Howard, that has been true. And it's true for our new president here. It's been true also for Morehouse men. You can have all kinds of conversations about diversity, but at the end of the day, graduates of Morehouse and Howard have to continue to be distinctive in this world.
Okay.
Amen?
Amen. Amen.
All right.
Okay. I had a follow-up question, but I think you might have. Let me just ask you this.
We can take up a collection if you want.
You've got Dean Richardson right there to pray us into prosperity, as it were. Yes or no? Morehouse is definitely the place where you can study James Baldwin. Would it be a place where James Baldwin would be comfortable as a student or as a professor?
Yes. I'm listening to the question behind the curtain on that question. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely yes.
All right. All right. And I'm not quite sure we would have gotten the same answer in different presidents, because it is a question that requires you to sort of engage what we now know to be James Baldwin's identity. And as you said, the question behind the question, some might not have necessarily seen the question behind the question.
Okay, so let me say this. I like what Dr. Frederick did in the point he made about his children and seeing a president, seeing a white president for the first time. And what that meant to me was there's some new norms.
Yes.
All right? And that's what I think of when I hear your question. I mean, the students coming through K through 12 today and in college today have a very different attitude about sexual identity than was the case in my time or in the era or two before me. I think there was considerable homophobia in the country, in higher education throughout, black or white, in black colleges, in black churches, in Howard and in Morehouse. I think you didn't find too many folk who were out as homosexuals at Howard University in the time of Mordecai Johnson, or at Morehouse in the time of John Hope or Ben Mays. It just was not accepted. Not so today. I think there are new norms. I'm quite glad you mentioned James Baldwin. James Baldwin has made what I would call a Morehouse-style contribution to the world. The Fire Next Time influenced me like few other books. My wife and I actually, we were dating at the time. We actually met James Baldwin on a street in Paris, and I went off when I saw him. I said, James Baldwin. I had read everything he had written. Everything he had written. And in engaging him for about 2 minutes, it was very clear to him that I knew him. And he said, I'm going to a club. I want you all to join us. Right. And we spent the next 4 hours with James Baldwin. So what I want you to understand is the way in which I appreciated James Baldwin was not, had little to do with his sexual identity frame. Right. I'm not disrespectful of that or ignorant of it or dismissive of it, but his contribution to humanity went well beyond that issues. And I'd love to have a few James Baldwins teaching at Morehouse right now.
There we go. All right.
Amen.
Let the church say. Amen. Okay, so this is a question from Facebook. And a graduate of our esteemed institution, Howard, poses this question: what is it that HBCUs do better than everyone else? And how do we get more people to better understand what those things are and get them to support those things financially? Capital and character.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think HBCUs do excellence better than anyone else. And I think when we look at the quality of instruction that you get at HBCUs, I think it's extremely high. Um, Dr. Wilson made a comment last night over dinner, which was the quality of the faculty here at Howard University that was assembled in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, in his opinion, and I share this opinion, was the best faculty of any college or university in this country. Not among HBCUs, but in this country. And some of the greatest faculty members that you will meet, I think, exist at HBCUs. My mentor, LaSalle Fall, there's no greater surgeon that you will come across. And I say that with a critical eye, because I operated with him, I've operated with others, I've operated all over this country, and I have seen no one with his level of intellectual fortitude or technical ability. So what occurs here, I think, is underscored by excellence. So let's start with that first. I think it's the first thing that occurs. I think the second thing that occurs is some people refer to it as nurturing, which I am not fond of, because nurturing almost sounds, especially in our in our economics, like a welfare state type of term. And I think we have to be cautious about that when we use the term nurturing. But the point is that I think at HBCUs, there is no greater pool of institutions that help people find their way. And I think that that's what you get. You have people who cajole and push you to things that are way beyond what you would think. So I show up here as a 5'6", 88-pound freshman 26 years ago with a simple dream. I want to become a physician and find a cure for sickle cell. And look what happens. Because of an HBCU. Things that I did not see in myself, could not see beyond myself, other people in this institution kept seeing it. And every time I thought, okay, this was the destination right here, let me pull up the handbrake, somebody hit the accelerator, and they pushed you to the next thing. And I think that occurs at the HBCUs like no other place in higher education. People, you get into an environment where people push you beyond what is capable. The third thing I would say is that HBCUs in general, as institutions, punch well beyond their weight class. And by doing so, create opportunities that interact with our society around us well beyond what you would expect. So if you go back in our history and you look at the civil rights movement and you think about where Howard University was, for the role that Howard University faculty and as an institution played in some of those landmark decisions, punching well beyond, well above our weight. What we're doing today on our campus with atmospheric science, what Miles College is doing in cybersecurity, right? I'm not even sure how many students attend Miles College to give you a census number, but when you look at, I'm telling you, when you look at what they do in terms of where they're punching in cybersecurity, it's amazing. What they may do in that field of study is transformative. And there are examples like that all throughout the HBCUs that exist today in terms of punching before your weight. And then the last thing that I would say that underscores the difference in HBCUs and what HBCUs provide is you still, in this country today, need a grounding in the African American culture and diaspora. And I don't say that lightly. I came to this country not knowing about the civil rights era because it was not my experience or the experience of my parents. And as I have learned about that and lived it, I think about my 10 and 8-year-old again, back to their perspective. We have to teach them about the civil rights era. They are not necessarily going to see those things in the things that they see. And I told a story this last evening about taking my two kids to see The Butler. We took them late at night because I thought they would fall asleep, and I was concerned that if it got a little bit difficult, they'll fall asleep and I wouldn't have to explain. They stayed up the entire movie because they were disturbed beyond what would be normal for an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. They were particularly disturbed by the movie. And on the way to the car, my daughter kept saying to me, why would somebody prevent me from being friends with Natalie? She has a Caucasian friend with red hair. And she said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, her disdain for what she saw on that screen was palpable. And I thought to myself, God did us a favor by not having her born in 1950 because
I mean, she would have lost her life. She had no lack of tolerance for what she saw. And I say that to say again, at HBCUs, I think we have a responsibility to educate not just the 10,300 students who come here about the sacrifices that were made for them, but the wider community, Caucasian and African American. Let's be clear. This is not just an education about them. So when I teach my kids things about that civil rights era, my expectation is they'll go back to their classroom and educate the folks around them. Because if you think about it, their parents have zero to very minimal motivation to sit down with them and say, oh, by the way, let me tell you about Martin Luther King, right? Natalie's dad, you know, he's a nice man. I've met him. But I'm not sure what his motivation is on a day-to-day basis to say he's going to educate Natalie about the broader perspective of the country she lives in, outside of the fact that she interacts with my daughter. You know, so we have a responsibility as well, not just for the 10,300 students who are here, but we have an exponential responsibility that they have to go back into the workforce, the community they live in, and go back and be able to articulate the message about what has occurred so that it informs people about where they are and their future in a way that everyone can live in a more harmonious and complete society. And we can't take that responsibility for granted. And I think, again, HBCUs must lead in doing that.
I want to agree. I want to build on that, but I want to take another angle. I actually am a little uncomfortable with the question because I think that question is a part of our challenge in a way that few of us understand. I think there is a value proposition for HBCUs, and I think Dr. Frederick got to some of the elements of that, but I think we're overdue as individual institutions to distinguish our own institutional value proposition built upon, but over and above, the value proposition for all HBCUs. That is to say, it is our job as president to ensure, while we may rest on the laurels of the general value proposition for HBCUs, that our respective institutions have a value proposition that goes well beyond. Another statistical part of the danger in talking about what's good about HBCUs is there are 4 HBCUs out of 105 that have a graduation rate of over 50%, 6-year graduation rate of over 50%. There are other data that I could share that suggests that this is a considerable challenge. There's a wide range. Now, 2 of the 4 happen to be sitting right here, right? Howard and Morehouse, Spelman, and Hampton. Those are the 4. The 6-year graduation rate ranges from a high of, I think, 87 right now, Spelman, to 5%, 6%, okay? I think you get into treacherous water when you try to group institutions with that wider range together with the same value proposition. I think there's more than just a little nuance there, and that's why I had a more than a small amount of urgency when I was at the White House Initiative about our need to change pretty quickly, adjust, get into some best practices, and become considerably more built to last than we are right now.
Follow-up question then.
Yep.
There are 2. I'll give you the opportunity to tell us what Morehouse specifically does well, and then how do you get your alums in the broader community to, in fact, support it more so financially, but also what can the leaders of the 4, or do they have an obligation, what can the leaders of the 4 do to help shrink the gap between the 4 you've identified and the rest?
Yeah. I think what Morehouse does well is create leaders. There's only one institution in the world who has graduated an alum with a Nobel Peace Prize, a national holiday, and is memorialized and granted on the mall. And that's Morehouse College. And that's Martin Luther King Jr. There are other graduates of Morehouse who have been distinctive in the world. I just talk about my class, producing Spike Lee, producing Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson. I'm now president of Morehouse. We have a guy who's helping us to transform our sports program, Derek Stafford. He's been an NBA ref for 25 years and knows a number of people who will help us in this endeavor. So I think our value proposition as Morehouse, related to a number of fields, we have produced leaders. Your other question was about the four. What can
Well, the question is originally posed assumes an answer not in evidence. Sorry, I'm a lawyer. So I'm going to back up and ask the foundational question. That is, do the leaders of the four you've identified with the graduation rates we like,
Yeah.
do you all have an obligation to the leaders of the rest? And if so, what is that obligation to help narrow the gap between the four and what do you do
That's right.
to the person with the 5%? Do you have any obligation to that institution with the 5% graduation rate?
Oh, I think we have an obligation to not just the one with the 5% graduation rate, but we have an obligation to the high schools with the 30% graduation rate. This is a lot of people attribute this notion of the talented 10th, which goes to the core of that obligation that you're talking about, the need to reach back and help others. We attribute that to W.E.B. Du Bois, correct? All right. Du Bois didn't originate that idea. The originator of the idea, Du Bois built upon it, popularized it. The originator of the idea is a man named Henry Lyman Morehouse. Right? This notion of reaching back is in the DNA of Morehouse College. Henry Lyman Morehouse wrote an essay on this about 6 years before Du Bois picked it up, and while Du Bois was at Atlanta University. So they had proximity, and Du Bois actually references it. So now, I will tell you, having been president of Morehouse for a year and a half, our graduation rate at about 55, 60% is not where it needs to be. I can also tell you that working through my successors at the White House Initiative and working through others, I'm all about conveying best practices. So I think our obligation is to share what we're doing with others. And we probably could use some help in creating platforms for sharing best practices. But even as we share them with the others, I want to be best practice according to the industry, and that's not in the 50% range. That's it in the 95% range. I want it. You asked a question about 2025, world of our dreams. That's where we want to be by 2025. That's when we're getting it right, when 95 to 100% of the students we admit in any given year graduate 4 years later, ready for the world. All right, that's where we need to go.
So, I think a few things I'll say about this. The first is, I think back to Dr. President Wilson's point about the variety of HBCUs. One of these schools that we're talking about right now has 35 students in it. So that's a very different institution to Howard's 10,300 students. That's as an example. So there clearly is a lot of variety. I still think the value proposition is one that we need to weave throughout all of them, because collectively there's a lot of interdependence. I'd like to see, we have professional schools that a lot of the other institutions don't have. And so we provide a pipeline to our law school, our medical school, our dental school. And as a university, a research university, we also provide a pipeline to graduate programs. So that interdependence, I don't see us on an island outside of trying to bring students from those institutions. Even if it's the 5% who graduate, I want that 5% enrolled in my graduate programs, my med school, my dental school. So there's an important interdependence that plays in this. I don't like the idea of an obligation to help. I would say we have an obligation to lead.
Okay.
And if we lead by example, by the right example, and provide the best practices, and I don't necessarily think those best practices are only the best practices that exist in the industry, with Harvard and Stanford being at the top in terms of graduation rates and that 90-something%. I'm not sure that I can apply the same best practices that take place at those institutions to my institution, simply because the circumstances are different. The number one reason my students drop out of and don't graduate is because of finances. It's not because of academic aptitude. The students that are in those institutions I referenced, those who drop out, I'm pretty sure, if they looked at percentage-wise, even though it's only 5% of their population, it's not because of finances. Now, when you look back at their 95%, how many of them do have financial struggles versus academic aptitude or application struggles? And I think that's where you get an intersection now of the question in terms of how do we apply the best practices. So we have an obligation to lead, and we have to figure out what are the best ways to implement systems, infrastructure, and policies and procedures that would mitigate the financial circumstance of the students. We are a private institution with a 60% Pell Grant eligibility rate. Just to put that in perspective, in this city, you have American U, Georgetown, and GW. American U's Pell Grant eligibility is 19%. The other two institutions are 11 and 12%. So just think of who's going to financial aid offices instead of going to class 3-4 weeks in. If I leave here now and I go to my financial aid office and I ask them how many students are validated, I still probably have 15-20% of students who are running around trying to figure out how to pay for school rather than studying the last 3 weeks of instruction they've had. So when I look at trying to close that gap and how we do it, that's Howard's circumstance. Take that down to the school that I just described that has 35 students in it. Or take that down to one of the institutions that has a 5% graduation rate and probably has an 80% Pell Grant eligibility rate. You know, what really is the dynamic taking place in there? So it is a complicated and complex problem, but at the same time, I think we have to make sure that we're honest about what exactly we're dealing with, so that we're not comparing apples and oranges, or we're not having people provide us with a yardstick that's actually 3.5 feet long, when the other tools they're giving us are 2.5 feet long. We've got to make sure the yardstick is, everybody has the same number of inches in the yardstick, and I'm not sure right now the way we apply our higher education dollars, the way we're applying some of our policies, to be quite honest, from the federal point of view, is really putting that yardstick in the right measuring. Now, just to switch gears a little bit, because I thought your question about what is excellent, and the one thing I've always admired from afar, and I say this even today now that I've met Dr. President Wilson, and I probably will say it 5 years from now, I don't know what a Morehouse man is, but I sure recognize one when I see it. Right? And I say that out of respect, because he makes a very good point about distinction and distinctive, having some type of distinction that separates you. At Howard, I think you have that same thing. When people ask me what we're good at, I tell them we don't have enough time to have that conversation. Because if I list, and especially in an audience like this, I would have to just look in the audience at every faculty member from every department, and I would have to make sure that I list to satisfy everyone in here, and that alone will take half the day. But I think there's a Howard man and Howard woman that is produced who goes out and changes the world around them. They frame their degree with the servitude to others, with the attitude that they must affect and impact the communities around them in a way that will transform. And I think we have to take that same attitude about HBCUs and about our obligation around education in this country. And I like the fact that Dr. Wilson referenced high schools. We have a middle school on our campus for that very reason. We recognize that our four-year experience that we're trying to create is not the solution. It is a part of the solution. It is a middle ground of the solution, because I'm just concerned about the 45-year-old who may have graduated 20 years ago and is not in a financial circumstance to donate $1 million to the university. I want to make sure they have financial empowerment when they leave here as well. So let me just be clear. It's a lifelong commitment. And I think somebody said it the other day. We look at graduation rates in a 4 and 6 year measure. And one of the things I hope by 2025 that you will see from Howard is we will look at the commitment to come to Howard as a 40-year commitment. We are trying to impact your life and the life that you will live to serve those around you. This is not a 4-year deal. When you sign up here, it's not a 4-year deal. And I want to make sure that people understand that. So that what we're trying to invest in you, we're trying to invest in you for the rest of your life. And again, you have to go out and exponentially apply that to everybody that you touch.
Let me just add one other point, because I think President Frederick is reliably clear. I want to go to back to the point about value proposition, because I say I shy away from the general, but there is one general that I think deserves to be underscored, and that is I believe HBCUs have historically been and most continue to be the most transformative institutions in all of higher education. That is to say, we all have stories of largely less well-prepared students, broken students, coming and being transformed by the experience. And I think all HBCUs can point to graduates who came broken, yet barely getting in, or getting in by some act of God, and then being set up to do transformational things in the world. I'm well aware of many stories about Howard University graduates. I hear them all the time. People are successful in their own right, and say the words, had it not been for Howard University, I wouldn't be where I am today, right? And you'll appreciate this, I usually say, you should write Howard University a check, you should, but that idea of transformation, I mentioned Spike Lee. Spike Lee was getting C's and D's freshman and sophomore year. But something about his experience at Morehouse and engagement of professors, the kind of professors that I referred to last night, and the rest of the time he got A's. When he found his voice, his calling, boom. Jay Johnson was our graduation speaker this past May. He said I had a 1.8 GPA after my first semester. But I kept listening to these guys in a freshman assembly and orientation, and they were saying basically, you can do this, you can do this. And he trotted out. Second semester of my freshman year, 4.0. Sophomore year, 4.0. The light switch went on. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Morehouse reading at an 8th grade level and was PhD ready by the time he graduated. The light switch went on. Got all kinds of stories like this about Morehouse. I'm aware of many of them at Howard and many other HBCUs. Morgan State University, where my mom went, transformed my mom. All right? she was pretty smart when she went there. All right, I must say, you got a good raw material when you got her. Mom being a teacher and dad being a preacher, just like it was for me. But she loves Morgan State to this day. To this day, in her heart. She's the reason why we went to HBCUs. So I just need to underscore that general value proposition, which we must never lose. Howard, Morehouse, and others. The notion, the idea, we need to be set up to take these young folk and to let them know the sky's the limit. Nobody can hold you back. And if you hear the voice of Howard Thurman, who has Howard and Morehouse in common, used to call it the sound of the genuine. The sound of the genuine. That's when you hear for the first time from a source that you can only describe as God, why you are here on this earth. That's what happened to Spike. That's what happened to Martin Luther King Jr. That's what happened to Jay. That's what happened to a lot of people. And there's something about an HBCU context as distinctive from other contexts, largely predominantly white, that can create that sound of the genuine for students better than any other institutions. Now, you need to write that down, because that's truth right there. All right?
Do we have questions? Note cards. Okay, I can do that. You already did that. Hypothetically, Michael Brown was an accepted freshman at Morehouse, Howard, given your hypothetical. The events in Ferguson occur. What's the message to your incoming freshmen as they begin the academic year, knowing that they will be one down because one of their ranks is not going to make it because he's been shot?
No, I think that message has to be the consistent message that we tell students when they come here to Howard, which is that we are about truth and service, and we're about doing that in an excellent fashion. The circumstances of Mr. Brown's shooting and the details of it, I think, has to be adjudicated in a court of law, that aspect of it. But the social construct that surrounds it is one that has to be debated within the halls of this institution, and the solutions of which have to come from the halls of this institution. And that would be my charge to the rest of that freshman class. Rather than be against something, be for something. And let's be for the solution to what created the social construct that led to that. And that means that we have to figure out several things within our classrooms. We have to figure out how can we close the unemployment gap. We have to figure out how we close our self-identity issue that I think we have. Because as I tell my students all the time, and I would have told the freshmen the same thing as I told them when I did meet with them for orientation. If I put on a pair of jeans, I went a pair of Rock and Republic jeans, by the way, so just to get some street cred from the students. And I put on a pair of jeans and a T-shirt, and I stood on the corner of Florida and Georgia Avenue. How many of them would drive by and say, "That's a university president"? I look like them, right? But how many of them would be willing to say that? I'm not talking about a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm talking about one of the very freshmen that would have been in his class. And until we can self-identify in a way that we have a certain pride and expectation of ourselves, we have to keep pushing. And that's the other thing that I would speak to my freshmen. I would like to see you get out of here in 4 years, go out and change the world, but at the same time, recognize that question that you could not answer in the affirmative today, hopefully when you leave here in 4 years and you do see a young black man in the jeans and a T-shirt who looks like you would think the best of him.
I think You know, Dr. Frederick is spot on. I think I would tell my freshman class, who are now down one because of this tragedy, that it goes to show you how much work we have to do. And I would instill in them a sense of obligation to honor his life by the way they live their lives. That there are obviously enormous structural and infrastructural problems in this country. Being post-racial is a myth. I think there's a lot of work to do. That Michael Brown did nothing to deserve that fate. Nothing. So we need more soldiers out there who will Howard them. That is to say, among the best stories from Howard University is the way in which a team of people got together and created a strategy for how to use the law to desegregate the public schooling system in this country. So we can look at the structures that we have, the problems that we have, and I believe a team of people from Morehouse, Howard, and other institutions can develop strategies to reduce and erase police brutality, either by setting up new structures or by exacting a price using the law so high that it will make a cop think twice about doing that kind of thing again.
Interesting challenge. I put on my other hat. We'll be in touch. I have a question from the audience, and you've been asked, both of you, to elaborate a bit on partnerships existing or potential between HBCUs and universities located on the continent.
So we have several MOUs and several partnerships with universities on the African continent. Our law students go to South Africa, as an example, and they have an ongoing partnership that has existed for years, in which they partner. I think we have several of them. What I would say, though, is that we have more MOUs signed than we have active partnerships. And one of the things that I try to institute beginning as provost is to make the point that we should not be signing MOUs that don't have substance around deliverables.
Right.
It's good to take pictures and shake hands and sign a piece of paper. I'm not too much into that. I want to see tangible things that are going to bring the interactions that we need to have and will have palpable outcomes. And I think that our faculty have been really taking that charge to heart to make sure that we have those things set up in a way that does it. We also have a lot of interaction around our research activity as well, which I think has to be underscored in terms of really where the breadth of the intellectual fortitude is going to come out of. And again, affecting day-to-day lives in those countries, and I think that those are important. Can we do more? Absolutely. Will we do more? Absolutely. We're certainly committed to getting more engaged.
Same. I'll be quick. I think we are going to. We have several partnerships developing in Africa, and I'll be able to talk about those in the near future because we are focused now on resources, and that brings me to just mention that another thing Dr. Frederick and I have in common is if we're going to do something, we're going to do it right, and in a first-rate, world-class way. I cut my teeth at MIT, and again and again and again, I saw how when they made the decision to go into a field or go on a venture, you gather all of the resources you need to do it right, to do it in a world-class way. There is a tendency for less well-resourced institutions to have a Me Too approach and to do it, to get in this space, and we end up a lot of times half-stepping or running out of resources and then having to reshape it, and then it devolves into something that was never intended, when I believe we should not start things until it is very clear that we intend to do them in a world-class way. And often, if you have to wait a year or two before you have the resources that will position you for that, it's better to wait a year or two.
Okay. One question. Both Morehouse and Howard are in the inner cities of DC and Atlanta. How do you see the growth of your campuses impacting the surrounding communities? We'll start with you.
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously I have a lot of love for Howard. Here again, I'll make a point there. There is a Howard graduate who takes me right to the core of that question. He's not just a Howard graduate, but he's a Howard trustee, and his name is Kasim Reed. Mm-hmm. Kasim Reed is mayor of Atlanta. And in month 5, of me being in office, we had a student shot and killed nearby campus. And I went to meet with Mayor Reed, and I told him that I was here in DC when that happened at Howard, and I knew he was on this board. And I said, you're mayor of Atlanta, and I experienced here what you experienced here. I'm going to keep it real now, I saw the DC Police Division have more of a presence around GW and American Youth than around Howard University. And I said, Mayor Reed, please don't make that mistake, all right? I want as much protection, if not more, as is given to Emory and Georgia Tech around Morehouse College. There's no way we should have a dangerous perimeter. There is no way. Young black men doing the right thing are too rare in this country to be losing some behind things like this. So what we've done, and I hate to take the question only to the safety issue, but the safety issue is a prominent one for us. And a Howard grad, Kasim Reed, we are in constant dialogue about this, and things have changed since that happened a year ago. But the other angle is this: we have a very positive developmental viewpoint about the community around us. We're working on a new campus plan that takes it into account. And the other thing that's happening in Atlanta is Arthur Blank is building a new Falcon Stadium closer to our campuses, and we have all kinds of resources coming in to the neighborhood around Spelman and Morehouse and Clark AU. And we should see some meaningful differences in the very near future.
Okay.
So
You sure?
it's a social issue for me.
Okay.
I want to see our campus be more welcoming to the community around us. I think that's part of the solution. Our campus is open. The streets on our campus are public. And we have to be less fearful of what we see around us simply because we don't understand it. And the only way to do that is engagement. We have to have engagement. So what you'll see from us during my presidency, hopefully, would be midnight basketball for the kids around here, access to our libraries on weekends for the community members around here. You'll see us getting involved with the ANCs to do mutual projects that would help not just beautify the neighborhood, but also bring us again in more contact. I think we have to do that. I've had an unusual experience here because I caught the bus to come in to campus from Northeast DC. And as a 16, 17-year-old on campus, I was subject to a curfew in DC in 1988. I had to be inside by 11 o'clock p.m. as a young, and especially as a young black male, I had to be inside to respect the curfew because that's who they were targeting. So I see it through a slightly different lens. I also, as a young resident operating at DC General, took care of many kids who were shot who I would then see in the neighborhood as I went about my business in this neighborhood, who would always identify me, stop and talk to me. Some of my friends would say, "Where do you know those guys from?" And I wouldn't reveal where. I wouldn't, just to maintain my street cred. I said, "Trust me, I've got friends everywhere." But the point being is that I learn a lot about those kids. I learn a lot about their circumstances while they're in the operating room. It's nothing like talking to an 18-year-old who's your age. At the time I went to med school, I was 20. I was operating and taking care of those kids as a third-year junior student. So from the time I was 21, 22, I was interacting with those kids who were close to my age, shot in a bed, recuperating. And when I go in, apart from taking their vitals and asking them how they were doing, I also had the opportunity to listen to their stories. Not much separated their lives from mine. Not very much. Opportunity is what separated us. Opportunity, and that's what this school is about. And therefore, I think how we engage our community must be underscored by providing them with an opportunity to engage, to be able to come on our campus and see something different. And I think that that's what we have to do and address it as a social issue.
I'm getting the sign. I got you. Well, thank you. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to more of your questions. Perhaps you'll have an opportunity to, you tweet. Do you tweet?
Yes, I tweet.
Okay, well, there's a lot of youth here, so I'm assuming a lot of these questions are from young people, so if you can get them down to 144 characters, that would be lovely. And
At
Oh, yeah.
Morehouse Press. At Morehouse Press.
at Morehouse Press.
Mine is at W Frederick MD or at HU Press 17. I have two.
You have two. That's it.
Professor Kroom and Presidents Wilson and Frederick, this panel was everything that we anticipated. We thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Please, we're going to prepare for the second panel. I'm sorry, a photo op, please, quickly. Because we want to prepare for the second panel. We don't want to lose our audience. It's a very important panel. So I would ask the panelists to please, the second panelist to please assemble. The second panel will focus on endowing the mission of HBCUs, its intellectual resources, and heritage. And we'd ask Drs. Lorenzo Morris and